Okay, all right. Well,
Ringers.
All right. Hi, everyone. If you want to start making your way in, we would love that. And please, let's try to sit in the middle so that we can feel like we're one little family. I like my families.
Yeah. It's good to like your family.
Some good conversation happening in the hallway. You want me to come there? But my microphone is on. Seriously, okay, we're gonna do a selfie as everyone makes their way in.
Summon them in.
I don't know what's happening right now. Guys, we gotta be quick. I gotta moderate a panel. Hi.
it's your panel.
Hi.
We got it.
Yes.
She ran mic on.
I know I have my mic on.
Wow, this is real life.
That's the leadership award.
All right, we're going back. We're gonna start.
Duck, Mina, duck.
All right. For those of you wondering, that is the members of the ONA Women's Leadership Accelerator. So whenever we all get together, we take selfies. So that's that. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us after that bizarre interruption. But hey, I'm awake now. Before we settled, we had made a whole bunch of retention jokes. So if anyone does feel like they need to stand up and do a stretch, we know that we are the last session before the keynote and before the end of the day, and it's been a very intense, fact-filled day. So we're here to talk about retention and how we
Thank you for not unsubscribing.
Pardon? So thank you for not, don't leave or that's a signal of unsubscribing. Yeah, we're here to talk about subscribers, and a lot of us have been in the subscriber business, whether it's been a few years, a few months, a few days, in some cases. The phase 2 of this is really thinking about how we keep them and how we keep people renewing and not canceling. So we've got an amazing panel here. Before we introduce them, I should just tell you guys a bit about who I am. So I'm Angela Pacienza. I'm the head of experience at the Globe and Mail. It's a funny title, but it really means getting our content to our readers across all platforms. We think about time of day, so our team looks after visual journalism, data journalism, the print product, newsletters, mobile, everything. So we will talk about all of that stuff. I'll turn it over to TJ here. He is from the Washington Post. We've got David from the Christian Science Monitor with us, and I'm going to try to say your last name.
You didn't say theirs.
Oh, I didn't say theirs.
You have to say
okay. All right, we're going with first names only. And Megha from Stat News. So I think to start, why don't each of you maybe just tell us a little bit about your role and how it plays in with retention before we get into questions.
Yeah, so I work with subscriber engagement at the Post, and I'm splitting my time between that and editing stories and dipping my toes into that. And I kind of view myself as the embodiment of those tweets from reporters that are, please subscribe. Like that idea and that thought in their head when they're asking our readers and their audience to invest in them. I'm kind of the person in the newsroom who can push for that. I have meetings with people on the business side and talk to them in ways that others in the newsroom are not. So making sure that our business side is important so that they can make use of that as they work with subscribers.
Okay, and how long have you had a paywall? Like, just give us a rundown.
Since 2013, we've had a paywall. We've been around since 1877. It was 3 cents for 4 pages. I looked that up before I came here. There's varying degrees. You can have obviously a print subscription that comes along with the digital access. We also have apps that are available too. So.
Okay, great. And David, do you want to?
So I'm David Grant. I'm the associate publisher of the Christian Science Monitor, which just means I run the business side there. And on our team, the 3 things we focus on are loving readers, being great teammates, and growing as people. And so at the beginning of that is loving readers and being really invested in their success and keeping them with us for an extremely long time. So everything we do from the moment we start talking to readers in the sort of marketing phase of things or in newsletters or on the site, all the way through how we talk to you and deal with you when you're a subscriber is sort of part of the experience that we think about. And our team thinks about that. We're the people that invest in that a lot with our partners on the editorial side. We have existed for this is our 110th year. We're based in Boston, Massachusetts. We have a print magazine that's about 32,000 circulation. We have a digital subscription product that just crossed the 10,000 circ mark last week, which was pretty great. And we've had a paywall since Tuesday.
He means Tuesday.
None of us believed that. We were like, really, Tuesday?
We thought it was a typo in an email, so yeah.
Tuesday.
And Megha?
Hi, my name is Megha Satyanarayana. Save everybody from having to try it yourself. I am the engagement editor at Stat, and just like anyone else in this room or potentially in the other room who's an engagement editor, that title is really open to just about anything that goes on in the newsroom. So during 1 week, I am our social media manager. I am working on community engagement. I'm working on helping our reporters find sources and work within their different communities from their beats to build relationships. I am also an actual editor. I edit reporters here and there. And I'm a reporter, so we're pretty busy on our end. Key facts about us, we're sort of just about to hit the 3-year mark. Our paywall started towards the end of 2016, and we started publishing just the year before. So we're pretty new to the retention game simply because we haven't been around that long. So yeah, this is going to be a good conversation.
Okay. Well, let's start on your end. What are some of your early retention efforts, given how new you are to it?
Sure. So our first year retention has been pretty close to 85%, and that's awesome. And it does represent people who are kind of our biggest fans. And I think one of the things that we do is something that may not necessarily be accessible to every newsroom, but it is kind of something that's important to us at Stat. One of our operations people actually gets on the phone when people drop their subscriptions and says, "Hey, why?" Calls them up and is like, "What's going on?" And they give us all different kinds of answers, I mean, some of them, they don't have time. It's too expensive. I mean, all the same reasons that I think a lot of other publications deal with when we talk about subscriptions. And we then turn around and we try to use that information to see if we can change our product, look at different pricing structures, that kind of thing. And since we are still fairly new to this, you'll have to ask me again in a year, I guess, how all of that is going.
Okay. David, what about?
Yeah, so our stat is about 3 and 4. So 75% of the folks that we've gotten to subscribe in our first year to our digital subscription have stayed, are still with us at this point. When we think about retention, I've already suggested a little bit, it starts at the very moment when that person converts, right? The way that they convert for us is driven usually by email, and it's driven by a very sort of op-ed style message that talks about the values and the mission of the Monitor and why you should support this organization. And that's the way we continue to talk to you through your entire time and your engagement with us, so that you know what the voice of this place is. We don't do a lot of offer-based discounts. We don't do a lot of buy now, flash sale. We don't do any. That's not, of course, sort of how we start.
You do 0 flash sales.
0. We did 2 emails this year that were just driven by kind of like a graphic that said, hey, do you want to subscribe? Here's a price. But we don't do any I'll just leave it at that, flash sailing or other sorts of things. So we think it starts there, and then just sort of on the reader engagement, sort of like how do you deal with this? When you reply to a Monitor email, you reach a human being, usually the author of that email, all the way up to the editor and the publisher, right? Like that is something that we manifest when people talk to us, we talk back. Our customer service folks talk like humans. Like when you get there and you have a technical question that needs answering, working with those people to make sure they are engaging with people in a real way. And that means a few different things. One thing is when someone has a problem, someone yells at you. People get mad on the internet, right? They yell at you. And you ask them, actually tell me more about that. And often what you will get back is the most interesting, helpful, useful piece of information, sort of what my colleague was saying a second ago, is that's very great. And we learn a lot from that, and we grow a lot from that. And one last thing I'll talk about there is we then talk to those people when we're thinking about working on that feature, we can then bring those people in to help us grow and learn. And then just in terms of sort of more pure retention things, one thing is just making the product better over the course of the year. We do a lot of trying to bring surprise and delight to people, which means special editions, things that they're not explicitly paying for, so that they get bonus value out of what we're doing. And there's a lot to talk about on the editorial side as far as that's concerned as well. So I'll leave it there, but there are a few thoughts around what we're doing today.
Okay. And TJ, you've been doing it a little bit longer, because more than Tuesday anyway.
Right.
So maybe tell us about some of your early retention efforts.
So I think the best way that we can keep people is by continuing to deliver the journalism, and it's been a big news year in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, you
no
may
idea.
have heard. Yeah. So just being able to, we were growing prior to that, and so we were well positioned to keep just publishing really important new pieces of journalism, being the best that we could offer for subscribers is the most simple and basic best way to keep them, I think. That's why they're subscribing. It's the accountability journalism. There have been investments in a rapid investigations team. So last year, there was an 8-person team. They can focus on quick turn investigations, and that one of those hires actually worked on the Pulitzer Prize winning story that covered Roy Moore's Senate race. On top of that, there's things that we're dipping our toes into. We have a subscriber-only podcast that we've emailed out, and it's like 8 to 10 stories behind the story, and that was something that our podcast editor, Jessica Stahl, she worked with David Finkel, who's fantastic, and kind of went deeper with some of our biggest enterprise stories. So.
Okay. Anyone want to share any experiments that failed miserably? Or maybe not miserably, but didn't go the way you thought they were going to go in terms of retention efforts?
Most of the things we try to do that are really neat that have sort of blown up on us have been because our back-end stuff was not lined up correctly. So we have a great retention marketer. We have someone who thinks about this every day. He's in Washington, D.C. His name's Matt. He's really smart. And Matt builds these beautiful journeys that say, hey, after so much time, prompt someone with this. Or, hey, 7 days before your subscription's about to renew, we should send you an email that says, hey, just so you know, we're being transparent with you, your subscription's about to renew. And that's all well and good until the system says, oh, sorry, that data extension is not populating correctly. And all that creative work goes up in smoke. And so that's the sort of thing that we're struggling with is how do we make our technology line up with our sort of creative aspiration? How do we get those things really well aligned so that you can do really cool stuff for readers at scale, right? Because Matt could email all those people, but he would do nothing more than email them. So we have to figure out how to do that at scale.
Okay. Anyone else try anything that didn't work? Or that?
I don't want to.
No, that's okay. Okay. I like learning from my mistakes. I make many of them. How do you know if your product is healthy over the course of months or weeks or years? Or how do you measure that to yourself? And how do you relay that information back to the people who are creating it?
I mean, we look at basic metrics. I mean, what are our page views like? What are our uniques like? What does our conversion funnel look like? How are we converting? Where are we getting newsletter signups from? One of the things that Stat does is we have these editorial awards that we do, similar to what a lot of publications do, and we look and see how many newsletter signups did we get from that. Because if you think about one of the things that we talked about this morning, if you were in that session, your funnel kind of looks like this, and all the stuff that you do kind of fits in a different place. And so we're just trying to make sure that all of our stuff fits in the right place so that we can get to this point where people are subscribing, and then we then turn around and we start giving them a whole bunch of stuff, a subscriber benefit. So to be very clear, I guess I should have said this in the beginning, not all of Stat is behind a paywall. Depending on the day, it's somewhere between 40 and 50% is behind the paywall. And so we still offer a fair amount of journalism for people free of charge, basically because we do want to try and introduce them to us, as a brand awareness ploy. So, how we know our publication is healthy is when we see subscriptions going up, obviously, when we see, churn either going down or leveling out in a really, reasonable way that we can then turn around and look at our metrics and say, okay, this is why this is happening. Or, maybe it's not metrics, maybe it's a UX thing, and we're like, oh, okay. And then we, go back to the designers and we can fix it that way. And then, we also look to see, quite a bit of our engagement also happens on social media. So, how are conversations going? How are our impressions? We look at all the different numbers. So we are very number driven, But in the ways that you can't measure, we also look to just see what is the sentiment around what we're publishing, right now, and we go from there.
And how do you decide, because you have that split, what goes behind the paywall and what doesn't?
Sure. So what goes behind the paywall, in sort of a very general way of thinking, but none of this is black and white, is stuff that is a little more insidery. So people who tend to be on more of the business end of, say, pharma, biotech, health in general. Some of those stories will go behind the paywall. Early science stories will sometimes go behind the paywall. Healthcare disruption goes behind the paywall. But then, there are times that we look at a story and we're like, no, we think that everyone should, have access to this right away. So it's a moving target, but we try to have a balance. Like, we try to make sure that about half of what we've got going on every day during, what we used to call the rollover, but is now, our first batch of publishing, about half is behind the paywall.
Okay.
There's our digital subscribers, they get a 30-day pass to share with one person, okay, and it renews every month. And one of my favorite things to do is find people who have a 30-day pass and they're sharing it on Twitter. And I also feel good because there are people who previously, without knowing that this thing existed, have said, I wish that I could get access to the post. I'm a poor student, I can't afford it now. And then directing the poor student to the people who are tweeting with a 30-day link and seeing them come together that's...
You connect those people. Like a matchmaker for subscription.
And I would love to see someone hack something. Right? I'm sure our business side does not want that to be totally
transparent.
Yeah, come to fruition. But I think if someone has a 30-day pass and they're willing to connect it and share it with someone who wants it, that's perfect.
Okay, cool.
So we've had for the last year, our digital subscription product was just a paid email. So that was what we've looked at for the last year. And so one of the things you're looking at with email are your very standard email metrics. Is the open rate going down? That's bad. Is the click-through rate going down? That's bad. It's got over 50% open rate, about a 50% open rate, and a 20% click-through rate. So those things were great. We were very excited with those. But on a week-to-week basis, we have an analytics team that's looking inside that to help the editorial folks fine-tune where they're moving different things around in what we call the package, but just sort of within that product. So we can say what's really performing well and what can we learn from and how can we do better. So we're trying to get left, right? You're trying to get away from the unsubscribe moment so people are really using it. And that means looking at the thing every single day and saying, wow, things that appear in this spot in our email are not doing very well. What's usually going there and why? And can we learn something from something else we're doing that we can upgrade that? So the next step for us will really be around looking at low engaged people that are not engaging with it very much and trying to target them and learn from them specifically. Again, that gets back to the personalization at scale, doing things at scale. But for the last year, that's where we've been really focused is the overall, and then within that, what's actually performing for people? Where are people clicking? How are they reading it?
Okay. I should say, if as we're talking, anyone wants to share a tip of what you do in your newsroom, or you've got a question, just shoot your hand up, and I think there's microphones somewhere, and if there's not, you can just shout really loudly, and we'll figure that out. Keep going? No questions right now? Okay. How do you talk about retention with the journalists in the news? How does that relationship work?
They're so focused on the stories, and what I do is I show them, if I see something do really well, I will share that with the reporter, and I'll say, look at this is how it's resonating. Okay. They might get some feedback on traffic from someone.
Would you go so far as to say, your story converted 21 people?
Not yet, no. And I think what's a little bit unfair there is there are stories that I think we're trying to figure out what is the story that no one knows for sure exactly the mix of stories that are going to get people to convert. And I think that's why we're all here and what we're all seeking to find out. And there are stories that we cover that make sense because they're part of a bundle or they're part of our mission that speaks to the broader reason why people subscribe. And there are going to be stories that are necessary and part of our mission that may not show the exact benefit to our subscriber retention, but I do believe that there's a reason and a purpose for them to be a part of it. So I don't want to mess up someone's priorities and make them think that they're failing because the story that might have been a little bit sexier got more subscribers, because I think there's a value that they have.
Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, we've done a lot of, or my colleague Andy, who's here with us, has done a lot of really good work in blending those things, blending a lot of different things together into one score. So that's where we're really going next, is like, there is something called your editorial judgment, and the editors are increasingly for us going to be scoring things, saying like, how well did this do on the distinction the monitor tries to bring to the table? That's one component of it, right? It's kind of a mission score in the way you're thinking about it, I think. One component is, how did our subscribers treat this thing? Did they read it, right? Are they engaged with it? And that's got points, and that's got parts of it. And how do future subscribers, how did people on the wide open internet deal with it? And that's heavily weighted toward, did you sign up for a newsletter after reading this thing? Did you go to a subscription page? And we don't do, did they convert, because the subscription page is kind of like our problem, and the reporter is not held responsible if their subscription page doesn't convert people, right? But by blending those three things together, you get a sense of like, what did this contribute to the organization in a lot of across some different scores? And that's how we learn, that's how we get better. So that's where we're trying to go with sort of this thinking, is like being able to knit those things together in an intelligent way that is meaningful to everyone in the organization. And so when we talk about how do you talk to editorial, well, the main thing we do is we have a whiteboard where we write the number of subscribers every morning.
Oh, really?
People know where that's at, tell you that, right? People know where that thing lives, and they want to know why it's not going up fast enough. But that's okay, right? That's like a good thing to say, because that's a net number, and if it's not going up fast enough, you could say, what happened? Well, this is why. And
Whose job is it to update the whiteboard every day?
One of our colleagues, a young woman named Emma Krepke, she comes in every morning, she hits the buttons, and she writes the number. And when we get the number of subscribers we need every day to reach our goal at the end of the year, we ring a bell. So we literally walk around the newsroom and hand someone the bell and make them ring it. And it's a really good sign when, like, you know, someone gets to do that, and usually we give that bell to somebody who's done something really great to like make it happen. So did you send the email this week? Did you have a great story this week? Have you just been buzzing around the business team's desk so we know to go pick on you? Like some, you know, there's some way we get that to happen, but that's like a kind of like a reminder, like, hey, every day we're out here like chipping away at this problem. Every day we're out here trying to make progress on this. And some days when we have a big announcement, we get to ring the bell more than once, and those are really good days. So.
Multi-bell days.
Multi-bell.
Megha, what about you over at Stat?
So I think we operate under the assumption that retention is everyone's responsibility, but how you go about making that happen is really dependent on where you fit in our newsroom. So I agree, we don't try to like burden, if you will, our reporters with, this is your responsibility, but we do ask them to do things like put stuff out on social, Hey, did you like that story that I wrote? Did it really make you go, grr? Well, subscribe to Stat Plus and get more of this. 30-day free trial, that kind of thing. So we definitely do that occasionally. But we also appreciate that all of our reporters have their own brands that they want to maintain on their social media pages as well. We talk about, we do have sort of large huddles, more, not very regularly, but, whenever the whim strikes. And then we do talk a little bit about, where we are with subscriptions, where we are with, engagement, where we are with this project, where we are with that project. And I think that that's really helpful because it helps frame the work that the reporters do in context. Because, for example, this has been a crazy big week for us because of all of the stuff we've broken about the ties between Cohen and Trump and Novartis. So, I'm happy to sort of share with you next week maybe how that played out. And that's sort of the work of like 6 or 7 reporters that have been, literally doing nothing but this for the last several days. But in the meantime, there's another reporter who's working on another topic that's also behind our paywall, who may be the one who is just routinely, continuously bringing in those conversions. And so the path from first touch to last touch is so variable for each different reporter that I don't necessarily think it's helpful to try and compare apples to oranges in that way. I think we just let them know that, we're all in this boat together. So whatever choice you make and whatever actions you take every day, even if it's something as simple as when you are getting off the phone with a source, just being like, Stat Plus,
I would get my hands taken off if I suggested that. Yeah, that's good.
Well, I mean, but I'm also not keeping track of who does it, and I think that that's part and parcel of it, right? Is that it's a trust play between me and the folks that I work with. Is just the reminder that we're all in this together. So however you choose to go about doing it, do it.
Yeah, everyone that works there is an ambassador for the product and for the content that you produce. What is something that, if resources weren't an issue or time, that you would like to do more of in that retention space?
I love the Spotify year-end review of what you listen to, and
the personalized one,
right, yeah. And I would love to be able to tell people, like, this is how you used us, this is what you shared, this is what you saw in your timeline most. We think you should go here next. Some sort of, and maybe there's like a graphic element too, because people love to hear about themselves. That's why the Spotify thing works so well. And I think it would be a good fit for news too.
I might be scared of what mine shows.
I know, there's also that. Yeah, you have to make sure it's private first before they,
Fair.
Yeah.
David, what about you? You're thinking through what you're ready.
Yeah, that is such a good, that's just a really great, that's awesome. For us, it's really, the thing I would want to be able to show, both I would want to know, and I would also want our editorial team to know is like, what are people really deeply fascinated by? What are people really deeply concerned with? And getting some sense of that they could tell us, like, automation really freaks me out. Like to get to that level of like, oh great, we should really be writing more about that, and we should really be talking more about that so we can get to things that people think are really meaningful. Because while we want to lead our audience, we want them to see us as people that bring them fascinating ideas and our distinctive take on what's going on in the world, it's also very helpful to get that first from them to say, like, what am I really deeply invested in? And so you get that sort of passively, you hear that, we talk to people, they tell you about it, but getting a stronger sense of that so that your end of year review looks like something that you really, you're not like, dang, I read like 40 Beyonce stories this year. Like that might be awesome, right? Like that's definitely awesome. It's just not maybe exactly what you're paying like the Christian Science Monitor $11 a month for, right? So we need to, I think something in that range would be great, or like a database administrator to make sure my Salesforce stuff all stuck together correctly. Or Kevin marketing guy's clapping because that's the truth.
Is anyone keeping track of how many times we've said Beyonce?
I feel like we're at least up to 3 today, but
I think one more and she'll actually appear
on the screen.
Beyonce.
Quickly,
Yeah.
Hey.
Beyonce. Didn't happen.
So resources, no
issues, events. I am a super face-to-face person, and I think that really honestly one of the ways that you are your brand is by being in front of people and being like, this is why you need us. Even if you don't know this yet, I'm going to convince you. But I mean, I think one of the great things about events is that it not only brings us face-to-face with people who are our readers, but it brings them face-to-face with each other. So I guess the way that I think about it is that, STAT operates in a space where there are a lot of people who know each other, but they're super shy to talk about things, sometimes because of legal stuff, right? Because they can't, SEC stuff, or Sarbanes-Oxley, or whatever, fancy insider act that I'm not going to remember the name of right now.
So you want to induce insider trading? That's
Yes. Yeah. No. No. I never said that. No, but I mean, I think that, so we can't necessarily do this stuff, in a community space like Facebook or LinkedIn as readily as other folks can, because people are just not going to share their opinions and talk about stuff in the same way. At least I don't think so. So I think for us specifically, I think if I had the budget of all budgets, I would just throw more events to give people in our space opportunities to get together and have good experiences that they can then in their gray matter be like, oh yeah, that was a Stat Plus thing. So now I'm going to go back to my office and hopefully I'm going to talk to my coworkers and we're going to decide not just to do individual subscriptions, but to do a big giant group subscription. Because that's a lot of revenue for us. Group subscriptions are really, are going to very quickly, I think, become very important for us over anything else. Over ad revenue, over everything. So that's what I would like to see. Whoa, hi. That's what I would like to see.
So sorry, when you say group subscriptions, do you mean like organizations buying them for their entire?
So, you know, it's almost akin to like, you know, when your university like buys a subscription to the Washington Post or the Christian Science Monitor, and you have like, you know, you have 80 keys or 100 keys or 10,000 keys if you're like the University of California system. I'm making numbers up. You know, we think that in our way that you know, academic institutions could use this, and biotechs and pharma companies could use us, and we'd like to do the same there. So. Yeah, so with a budget that is endless, I'd like to bring more people together, put Stat Plus in people's minds, have them go back to their organizations and be like, I should not be the only person in this office that knows about this.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Do you guys sell? Does your organization sell group? Like, are you after that market?
I'm not in the business side, so I can't.
Okay, well, that's okay.
No, we're not, but we should be later.
Okay.
We get calls, people call, but there's a question of where's the value, because if you don't have somebody out selling those things, I mean, Stat has a really intelligent way of how you guys pursue group subscriptions, because you can see one person in a company, right, and then you can go say, hey, all of Bayer, you guys should buy this. But for us, it's like somebody calls up from a library, and it's like, hey, you can just buy a subscription and use it for the whole library. So it's just a matter of what's the most value right now.
Okay, got it. Any questions before I carry on? Okay, I will carry
We're doing such a good job. If
We have one.
Any questions?
Celeste?
Yay. Sure.
I have a little bit of experience with group subscriptions, and I find that the retention question becomes very different because you're trying to also demonstrate metrics to the group subscriber in a way that's very different from sort of an individual value. Is that something that you're already thinking about with the group subscriptions that you have?
I'm going to say yes, not really knowing that answer because I'm an editorial person and I'm not a biz person. But I am happy to try and find out and get back to you.
If someone were to have one of those, you could, there's, especially higher ed, there are institutions that are big enough that have alumni all over the country, and I think it would probably be really cool to have those alumni, some way to those alumni who may work for the organization, who may be published. It would be great to somehow say in the end product, like, look, this person is one of you. So when you sign on, you see something like that. That would be my...
I mean, personalization, I think, is a lot of our goals. You know, we want to be able to give people the thing that they want, but we also want to give them what we also think that they might want to read. And so, you know, whatever drives them into that subscription, yeah.
Will anybody object if I ask another question about that
For it.
front? So I actually find that the Spotify example of the year in review is overly creepy for somebody like me, and I suspect I am not alone.
Listen,
and I think this
not,
is the real
yeah.
risk in a lot of the personalization push. So, you know, this has come up in a lot of sessions, is being able to sort of communicate personally at scale. But how are you thinking about writing that line? Because I think with retention, this comes up a lot more frequently for all of you.
Yeah.
You are yes, yes, and yes, and especially with everything that's going on in this Facebook Cambridge Analytica moment, that's a real issue and concern. Maybe the personalization part is how much your subscription contributed to the end goal or to the mission that you care about. But something to say, something that appeals to the navel-gazing. So I think like telling you how much a story cost to report and where you factor into that could be the graphic and the personalization part. But you're right, that is, you don't want to turn people off by being so creepy.
So you make it opt-in.
I mean, we're so far away from being creepy. You know what I mean? Like there's so many miles I have to go before I could even approach creepy in that way. So there's that. Like I think that's the first thing, and I think the second thing around that is, it's not. I don't actually think the goal is like totally custom. We talk to you in like a unique and special way. It's just that you feel heard by this organization and like you feel respected by this organization, and that's really what we're aiming for. So it's not like there's a lot of new startups that we're giving you this custom diet of just things meant for you, and like there's a whole theory around that, and you know we can get into that if we like, but I don't think that's the mission. Certainly not the mission at the Monitor. We have a very strong sense of like we produce distinctive journalism. We listen to our readers, but we're not led by our readers. Like we're walking with them and we're showing them some things and they're telling us some things, and that's good. And that's the balance we want to strike. But I still think in terms of the relationship with readers right now, it's very much broadcast still. And so the more that we can sort of let them talk back to us in a way that makes sense to us and we can actually use to give them something back that they really want, that's beautiful. And that doesn't get into the creepy category at all. As I've said, like the technology that we have is like, you know, I can't even tell you when your subscription ends in order to kick off a journey so that I can send you an email, right? Like I got to get that thing lined up first before I can start worrying about the other stuff.
You're not creepy, not for lack of trying. It's the technology that's.
I wish I could be a lot creepier.
So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that, you know, if you're somebody that's putting time and effort into reading something that is health and science, you're already sort of personalizing yourself. So this would be sub-creeping on your internal creepiness.
I'm so glad I'm not the only creepy one.
I feel like
Join the creep
I'm
club.
digging a hole here now.
This conversation's going places I had no idea it was going to go. It's great.
First Beyonce, and then creepy. Yeah.
And Beyonce. No, I mean, I totally agree with these guys. Like, it's not our intention to be creepy, but you know, we definitely want to try and make sure that people are getting what they want, and they're able to navigate to what they want as quickly as possible. And so, you know, I mean, user behavior is something that I think everyone in this room is really interested in, and I think we all have our own ways to try and figure out what works best for our organizations. So, you know.
Yeah.
I think the business side doesn't get enough love from the newsroom sometimes, and they support us, and they're the ones who are really pushing a lot of those products like on the ground in a very real way. And they do a lot of great work in terms of making sure that the straight up transaction process is streamlined and making sure that that's as best as it can possibly be. So I want to be fair to them and make sure that they're an important part of that.
Would you say that is the technology part of it one of the biggest roadblocks?
I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have print publications, but if anything that backs up to the one legacy carrier in the United States for shipping a print publication around the country, I just leave it at that. There are really serious challenges around that, like just being able to, we can't accept PayPal right now on our site. Why? Like, that's really bad, right? We need to be able to fix that. So there's just a lot of those things, whether it's in like kind of your CRM or in the transactional technology. The Post does brilliantly well, like beautifully, that we're definitely struggling with, so that we can make it easier in this, like having a direct relationship with people. We can make that much easier and feel like an organization that respects and is paying attention to you and serves you in the way you want to be served.
I will say, you know, I see complaints or feedback on social all the time that's like, I'm a subscriber, and every time I try to visit you from blank, I'm asked to log in. And we're all subscribers to many different places, and that's like a known issue for us. So there's a Washington Post help team that it monitors social, and I try to play kind of like a second line of defense there and make sure that people, if they complain about something, that they're seen and heard.
Yeah. Or sometimes you'll make a video about somebody subscribing to the paper.
So Katy Perry, she was really annoyed that we didn't have a print product available to her in LA. We're in Washington, and
I remember this.
In case you couldn't tell. And so we saw this, and that's an audience that would be, we had to do something with that. We couldn't let it go unanswered. We're talking about retention now, but I feel like acquisition is the other side. You can do a lot to stop churn, but it doesn't. One of the ways to keep that number is to also grow. It's not just attrition. And we figured, what could we do to make her, to reach her audience? So we had our video team, our creative video team. They went to the printing plant and they did a very funny video. We got our business team to put together a custom URL for a 30-day pass, and we tweeted at her from the main account. And those were, what was nice is that was 4 or 5 different teams, and we were all thinking about it in our own way, but it was my job to get everyone in the meeting and say, what are we gonna do to be on the same page? And that's not retention, it's acquisition, but still it's
all part of, we wear many hats. We wear many hats.
You know, right?
The story would have been way better if it was Beyonce, totally.
But I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, you know, I know that the title of this session is retention, but I mean, honestly, acquisition is the first part of retention. So, I mean, everything we do has to also focus on getting people to sign up in the first place. And, that's the combination of good UX and good journalism and all this other stuff that, gets people to come in and stay, and then we can do the hard work once we get them there.
Yeah. Do you guys find that as more outlets put up paywalls and offer subscription products, does the competitive landscape help or hurt, or or do you see, are your customers getting more comfortable having multiple subscriptions, or do they pick and choose at the end of the year?
What do you think about that, Megha?
That's a good question.
Can we tell yet? Maybe it's too soon.
I think for us, maybe it's too soon. I mean, most of our competitors, if you sort of think of like the sphere of stat, our competitors are kind of like the Venn diagram. Some of them are kind of over here in this space, super insider biotech. Some of them are over here, super insider healthcare. Some are over here. So, I mean, they're all our competitors. And so I think that the thing that we do, that we try to offer everybody is, this is a level of analysis and a level of conversation that isn't so granular that it's like lost to everybody, but it still gives you information that you can act on in whatever the way it is that you act. So, I don't know.
There's a guy named Holden the Page on Twitter, and last week he sent out a tweet that said, if I paid for subs to my news sources yearly cost, and he goes through the list, Bloomberg, $479, New York Times, $191, the FT, $309, The Information, $399, Washington Post, $100, the Register Guard, $480. And I was sending that tweet around to people at the Post, like, check this out, and they're like, oh, we're pretty good. But you have to think, like, if someone were to go through and index everything that they read and tally that, are they going to choose you? So that's something we have to get comfortable with. To finish it off, he said total is $1,958 a year, or the cost of my car, to which Ev Williams, I think that's I got his last name, EV on Twitter, responded, maybe news should cost, maybe your news subscriptions should be the cost of a car.
I mean, sorry.
No, that's it. But.
Paying for high quality news in the United States today is pretty much a deviant behavior. There are 340 million people in this country, in the United States, right? And another dozens million more in Canada. And 2 million of them around the world pay for the New York Times. So I suggest that there's a huge market of people out there that are not paying for any not have any paywall logins, period, right? They have zero, right? So that's definitely for sure. And that's especially among people that can't pay $2,000 a year for their news, right? So I think there's sort of an equity and access question that will come next after we answer the sustainability question for the whole media sphere as a whole, right? Like, until we can actually pay people, then we can figure out how to go down this, make sure everybody gets access to things. So for us, I think that is a really big competitive question, is just how do you stay distinctive? How do you stand out amongst a bunch of other competitors, definitely in the general news space, but that there's enough market out there for all of us, for sure. Like I think there's plenty. We have a question also, so.
Yeah, I was going to add to your. Excuse me. Courtney here from WDET. I was just going to comment on that because I work for a public radio station, and typically we've sort of handled the membership model. So the questions that we're asking ourselves are about equity and accessibility, making sure that who is supporting us is representative of who we seek to serve. And one of the things that have been helpful to that end is thinking about membership in different ways in terms of what value people are adding. And sometimes that's not always monetary. That can be being an ambassador. That can be you have a small business and you're offering trade. That can be volunteerism. So thinking of that question, so I'm glad that you mentioned it, because that's exactly what I was about to comment on. Yeah.
Yep. We think about it a lot. We have a lot of older readers. We have a lot of people on fixed income, and they write in like, hey, I can't pay that. And like we could just say, it's digital product, it costs us very little to do it, so we can help them, right? But I think as an industry, I do think that's a really serious question. But I think we do need to be actively working on that. I also think that right now the answer is like, are these places going to make it? Like, are we good, basically? Especially at the local level. Figuring out how to pay for and sustain these organizations is super important. And it doesn't mean that one's better or more important than the other, just sort of like what's the order of operations. And I'm glad people are out there thinking about that, particularly in local, right, in places that really need it. big deal.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think public radio, for me, when I think about subscriptions and memberships, they're always my go-to. Like, the way that they engage with people on, are they quarterly drives? It feels, every time it happens, yes, I get annoyed after the third or fourth reference, but they have real relationships with people who are comfortable paying for the news that they get, and they tell you really clearly what you're getting for that money. And people who listen to, when you're in the car, you can't skip forward, you can't click out, you're there, you're a captive audience, and the way that they put it in front of you, I admire, and I think there's something to be gleaned from that for us.
And I think it's something that a lot of us are starting to adopt, this idea that, as journalists, we have to remind people that the work that we do costs X amount of money, and that if you want it to be at this level, we need your subscriptions. We need your buy-in, So it's almost like it is a community. You're sort of building that community that way.
And I also think with stuff like Spotify and Netflix, with people having all of these subscriptions in their lives, they are, and in addition to that, there's Trump's tweets against the free press, and so people subscribing out of an act of civic duty, all of those have come together in this moment now, so I feel optimistic.
Optimism, I like it. Any other, sorry. We've got 9 seconds, but we can squeeze in another question if anyone has anything.
We're going into break.
Do you each want to sort of maybe leave us with one thought, or are you good? We can do it afterwards.
We can do a thought, but I ain't going first.
Oh.
No, I'll go first. I'll go first. I was just right. Yeah, optimism, right? I think that everyone in here is working really, really hard to make their product successful. But what the product really is the journalism. So, I think anything we can do to continue to build community within our newsrooms, so that everybody understands the role of people who do engagement and who do audience development and all these jobs that have these titles that we're all still trying to figure out. I mean, these are all fairly new roles. I think is important, and I think anytime, I sit with the editorial team, but I also have, Slack channels that are specific to biz and Slack channels that are specific to editorial, and I have my line in the sand and I don't cross it, and I think that's really important. So I am to let everyone in here know that if you would like a subscription to Stat Plus for the next year, just go to our website and type in all caps, Media 18, and you'll get it at a discount.
I like that.
Wow.
Okay. David's like, I didn't bring
respect.
a discount
That was beautiful.
code.
I listened to
No, ours is csmonitor.com/free trial. It's real simple. But I would just like to revise, when you say if I had unlimited money, what would I really love to do? I would really love to have a just perfectly free-flowing user experience on the unsexy fundamental side of this business. From the moment you subscribe, if you want to manage your credit card, if you need to change your address, if you need to change your email, you can flow right through there. If you want to add a product, take a product off, we leave so much money on the table because we are just in our own way. And it is so painful for readers to go through it. And we spend a lot of time thinking about it. And we have a lot of external dependencies, people that we rely on outside of our organization that have us handcuffed to certain things that we cannot get out of in a time-efficient manner. And if I could just blow that away and let people run through it the same way that you can use Apple Pay to sign up for LinkedIn Premium right now in 5 seconds if you wanted to, that would, I think, change materially the trajectory of how fast we can grow as the Monitor and also as an industry. And so we're holding ourselves back on the acquisition side, and then definitely on the retention side, because people look at this and they are in an age of Netflix and Spotify and everything else where you can flow right through and turn it on and turn it off at will. And they look at us and they say, what's wrong with you? Why are y'all not that good, right? Why am I paying a premium for this thing that is broken when I look inside the gears there? So that's a place where we need more investment. We need to spend more time. And if there's any big philanthropy types out there, putting some money into that before the next thing I see about VR, AR, or drones, or whatever else would be amazing, because that's what actually changes the game for the subscriber, right? So like, well appreciated that we need to be looking over the horizon. I don't mean to like demean that activity. It's just that like, where's the emphasis, right? What are we really thinking about as an industry? That would materially change our retention game, would materially change the game for us as a company and as an industry.
DJ, do you want
Shout out to Plus Ones. What's up with Google?
One of my favorite things, we have a reader representative who takes and directs complaints from readers, and she transcribes her voicemails and she posts them on the intranet. And there's one that
Intranet.
On the intranet, so it's not available. You can't go and see it. But the voice.
That'd be an amazing Twitter
I want
feed.
that product.
Yeah, that'd be like
The voice
reader
of
complaints.
our readers, when they leave a message with her, their voice, it always maintains the voice even when it's transcribed. So this was called in. Someone made a phone call, 7:12 a.m. on Sunday, March 4th. This is a mad subscriber. I pay extra for a guide, and I don't need a goddamn ad on the back page, as I am pushing 90 years old and often refer to the channels on the back page. Goodbye. And like, so we're thinking about all these answers to something that feels like a new problem, but this guy's been our reader for years and just following through on why he bought us and catering to those needs and making sure he's happy. That's all we're doing. It's just with Twitter and email. So.
Yeah, okay.
CSmonitor.com, ad-free when you subscribe.
All right, well, thank you so much, and thank you to all of you. And I think our closing keynote is coming up shortly, so thank you.
Thank you all so much.